sanctuary found in the dark. Feel your heart beat for something more. A subtle spark, a distant star is born. Oh,
good morning, Red Door. We're the Howe family. My name is Matt. This is my wife, Bridget. And we wanted to welcome you to Red Door Livestream Labor Day Edition. All right, we got a few announcements this week. It starts off with a camping trip that's coming up here on September 19th and 20th down in the Red River Gorge. We used to call this the backpacking trip, but that's not entirely accurate because we actually hike into a campsite and do day hikes from there. If it's something you're interested in, you do have to be 18 years old. The cost is $15, and if you need some equipment, don't worry about that. As you sign up, just let us know, and we can make sure that we get you hooked up with all the essentials you need for a great weekend.
For our next announcement, Red Door is part of a prayer canopy. We're joining with over 40 different churches and ministries in the city to cover the city in prayer. It will be on September 12th, and our long-term goal is to cover the city in prayer for 24 hours. So if you like being up at 3 a.m. and praying, we need you. Anyway, we would love for you to join us. Get a hold of that sign-up sheet, sign up, and pray through the prayer prompt guide. And God is moving, so let's be part of that.
Also continuing our Saturday morning traditions of bike rides. So next Saturday, September 12th, we'll be going on the next one. We start at Joe Nuxall Miracle Field and we ride out from there, and there's 3 rides. We've added a third one. So there's a short one that gets you to the dam. There's a medium one that gets you to Markham Park in Hamilton, which is great for families and picnicking. And there's a longer ride that goes to Rentschler. So if that's something you're interested in, you can sign up or just show up there at Joe Nuxall at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Next up is Red Door's birthday and fall kickoff. Who doesn't love fall kickoff? Well, this year it's gonna look a little different, and the birthday party is gonna look a little different. It will be done in a safe, COVID-friendly manner, but we still wanna celebrate all the things that God has done over the last 10 years. So be looking for more information to come because the birthday's coming.
Birthday's coming. All right, right now, please join us in a time of worship.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord, 'cause it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. You bring life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. All the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will say, great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will say, great are you, Lord. 'Cause it's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. Yeah, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord.
1 Corinthians 12, spiritual gifts. The human body has many parts, but the many parts make up one whole body. So it is with the body of Christ. Some of us are Jews, some are Gentiles, some are slaves, and some are free. But we have all been baptized into one body by one Spirit, and we all share the same Spirit. Yes, the body has many different parts, not just one part. If the foot says, "I'm not a part of the body because I am not a hand," that does not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear says, "I'm not a part of the body because I am not an eye," would that make it any less a part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, how would you hear? Or if your whole body were an ear, how would you smell anything? But our bodies have many parts, and God has put each part just where He wants it. How strange a body would be if it only had one part. Yes, there are many parts, but only one body. The eye can never say to the hand, "I don't need you." The head can't say to the feet, "I don't need you." In fact, some parts of the body that seem weakest and least important are actually the most necessary. And the parts we regard as less honorable are those we clothe with the greatest care. So we carefully protect those parts that should not be seen, while the more honorable parts do not require this special care. So God has put the body together such that extra honor and care are given to those parts that have less dignity. This makes for harmony among the members, so that all the members care for each other. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer with it. And if one part is honored, all the parts are glad. All of you together are Christ's body, and each of you is a part of it. Here are some of the parts God has appointed for the church. First are apostles. Second are prophets. Third are teachers. Then those who do miracles. Those who have the gift of healing. Those who can help others. Those who have the gift of leadership. Those who speak in unknown languages. Are we all apostles? Are we all prophets? Are we all teachers? Do we all have the power to do miracles? Do we all have the gift of healing? Do we all have the ability to speak in unknown languages? Do we all have the ability to interpret unknown languages? Of course not. So you should earnestly desire the most helpful gifts. But now, let me show you a way of life that is best of all.
Good morning, Red Door. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to teach this morning. And if you don't know me, my name is Megan Eckstein. And my husband Ben and I have 5 kids. So we have 4 girls and 1 boy, and it's just as crazy and loud as you are imagining. In fact, at the beginning of quarantine, we just quickly realized how much our daily lives look like a musical. So much so that we created a Spotify playlist called The Ecksteins, the Musical, because everything in our house, even the smallest of tasks, has to be done while singing. So if you're making a ham sandwich for lunch, you can't just do it quietly. Like, you have to sing a Shawn Mendes song while doing it. And when it's time to unload the dishwasher, you have to sing a Billie Eilish song while you put the dishes away. And it's totally normal for there to be 4 competing musicals happening at the same time, because no one is ever singing the same song. And a little confession about me is that I don't like musicals, like, at all. In fact, I tried to watch Hamilton and I got about 20 minutes in and I was like, really? Another song? And I had to walk away. And I know a lot of you are like, oh my gosh, how could she say that about Hamilton? But it's true. And if you know me or you heard me teach last year, you heard me share a story that might kind of clue you in as to why I just don't like singing. And sometimes I'm left wondering, like, I think I was put in the wrong family because I just really don't belong here because I'm the only one who doesn't like musicals. And just like a true musical always has a lead role, in our house, that always goes to our oldest, Riley. And she is definitely the one who is the most passionate, loud singer, and she's also usually playing her ukulele too. But this is actually a really good role for her because she's really gifted musically. So she has gotten to play her ukulele and sing here on the live stream. She has gotten to sing on an episode of the podcast Unpacked, and she's gotten to use her giftings in Mexico on a couple of family missions trips. And also, if you can remember back all the way to when we used to be able to meet in person, she had the opportunity to sing on stage and lead us in worship. It was so fun to see her using her giftings that morning, and also just equally as fun to see the way that everyone just built her up after the gathering for her using her giftings. And Riley just could not stop talking about that day and how fun it was and how much she loved it and how much she enjoyed it. And she was just radiating the entire day. And it was just what every parent wants to see for their kid, to see them stepping into their giftings. But the problem is when you have multiple kids and there's one who's in the spotlight, there are lots of other kids who aren't in the spotlight. And that same spotlight that was revealing Riley's giftings was also revealing another daughter's insecurities and fears. And so that day, that morning, I saw Riley being built up, but I saw another one of our daughters, Millie, just really shrinking back and withdrawing. And the more and more that Riley talked about the experience, you could just see the tears welling up in Millie's eyes. And I finally got the chance to just ask her, like, hey, what's going on? And at that point, the tears just started to fall down her cheeks uncontrollably. You see, Riley being in the spotlight and using her gifts called so many things into question for Millie, and it just left her asking so many questions. She was asking things like, well, what do I even have to offer? And where do I belong? And why am I not good at anything? And just wishing, well, if I could just be a little bit more like Riley. And don't we all feel that way? I know I do. And it's only natural for us to compare ourselves to others and wonder if maybe we were skipped over when it came to giftings because we took that spiritual gift test and it told us we don't really have any gifts. And so we have no idea how we're gifted, even if we're gifted, or where we belong. And even as I step into using my gifts right now, I don't feel adequate and I don't feel like I belong. And I feel like, Ness is so great at teaching. And if I could be just a little bit more like her. And so what do you say to your kid who is asking these questions about where she belongs and if she even belongs? And is convinced that she has nothing to offer the church? And what do we say to ourselves when we feel that way? And I think there's a temptation to do one of two things. And we can either be really, really hard on ourselves and tear ourselves down and point out to ourselves all the ways that we fall short, or we can build ourselves up with as much positivity as we can to force ourselves into feeling like we belong. And if we just tell ourselves enough nice things, then maybe we'll have value. And don't get me wrong, it's really important to do those things, to speak truth to ourselves and to point out the things that we're good at. But I think we miss something so big if that's all that we do. And Paul is going to show us this as we pick back up in 1 Corinthians. And so we're going to start in chapter 12, verse 12. And Paul is going to start, and he says, "For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slave or free, and all were made to drink of one Spirit." And so we see that Paul is reminding the Corinthians and us, because he's told them this before, and he's reminding them again that we are all part of one spiritual body, the church. And that the body of Christ is where there is no distinction between these things that usually divide us, things like Jew, Greek, rich, poor, black, white, Republican, Democrat, and that there's no distinctions because we are one because of the Spirit. And so when our kids question or we question where we belong, we must remind them and we must remind ourselves that the gospel brings us in as one body. And we see that Paul is going to turn to this analogy of the physical body to kind of drive home this point more, that we are one body. And he starts in verse 14, and he says, "For the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot should say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body. And if the ear should say, 'Because I am not an eye, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body." And at first, when we see this analogy, it seems kind of funny, right? Because we have a foot saying, "Well, I don't belong because I'm not a hand." And we have an ear saying, "Well, I don't belong because I'm not an eye." And it seems kind of silly until we realize this is exactly what we do. This is Millie saying, "If I were just a little bit more like Riley," or it's me saying, "If I were just gifted a little bit more like Josh or Ness, then I would feel qualified to be here and to teach." And Paul, he's saying, like, whoa, that's just not true. In fact, the very nature of the human body contradicts this way of thinking. It doesn't matter if the foot isn't a hand, it's still a part of the body. And he goes on in verse 17 to say, "If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? But as it is, God arranged the members in the body, each one of them as he chose. If all were a single member, where would the body be?" And so Paul is saying, if we had a physical body that was just an eye, that's not even a body. That's literally a monster. And instead, God has made our bodies from many different parts, and he has put each one just where he wanted it. And so we're not being formed into this homogeneous whole where we lose our uniqueness. Instead, it's you and I, unique pieces being brought together by the Spirit to make a whole and complete body. And so there's this temptation to look at someone else and wish that you were more like them. But actually, you weren't made to be like them. You were made differently so that the body functions as it should. And so it was very intentional, and it was done on purpose that we are all made differently. And before Ben became the family pastor at Red Door, some of you may know he was a high school science teacher. And if there is anything that I hate more than musicals, it's science. And in high school, I had to take a biology class. And by the end of the year, I was just done. So I felt like I had not learned a single thing. And it came time for the final exam. And I was like, I am just not gonna study. I don't even care. I haven't learned anything. And so I didn't study. And I went in, and I, in fact, had not learned anything all year long because I bombed that final exam. I think it was the first and only time that I ever got an F. And fast forward to college, and of course, I needed 1 science credit to graduate. And I had waited until my senior year to take that science class. And guess what was the only subject that fit into my schedule? Biology. And so I thought, oh no, like here we go again. But you know what happened? That biology class, where I was the only senior in a freshman class, became my favorite class that I took my entire college career. I mean, I still couldn't tell you anything about biology, but I remember sitting there and my mind was just blown as we studied the body, and we studied just how intricately it was formed and fashioned, where every single part has a role to play so that the body can function correctly. And when those parts are placed together, it creates a whole. It creates one body. And just like the physical body, the spiritual body is exactly the same. It has been formed with that same, or it has been formed and fashioned that same exact way, where there is one body, but there are many parts. And you and I, we are those parts. And the Father has gifted you, and the way that the Spirit manifests those gifts is very intentional. You have a very special function to play in the body, and you have a specific purpose, and you are needed for the body to function. And so far we have seen how Paul has used this analogy of the physical body to kind of dispel this way of thinking that we have, where we say, well, the body just doesn't need me and I don't belong. And we're going to see him flip this and show us how we also cannot look at our uniqueness and our giftings and say, well, I just don't need the body. And so he's going to start in verse 21. And he says, the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable. And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow the greatest honor. And our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it. So Paul is saying that the parts of the body that seem to be weaker, they're actually indispensable. And the parts of the body that we think less honorable actually bestow the greater honor. And the parts that we consider to be unpresentable actually require the greater modesty. And when we hear weak, less honorable, and unpresentable, we all know what parts of the body come to mind. The woman's hair and how it should be covered, right? But what I actually want us to think about are the organs. And when was the last time that you thought about just how spectacular your kidneys are? Or just how useful your pancreas is? Or what about your spleen? Do you even know what it does? I mean, obviously, I don't know what it does because we already talked about how I'm not very good at biology. But that's the point that Paul is making. We have so many parts of our body that are not visible, yet they are vital for life. We cannot live without them. And we would never look at those parts of the body and say, well, I just don't need you. And so we would never look at our heart and say, I just have no use of you. I don't need you. Or to your lungs, just because you're not visible and I can't see you, I don't really think I need you. And we would never say those things. And isn't the spiritual body, the church, exactly the same? So we have people who are gifted like Riley, where their giftings put them in the spotlight and they're visible, and it's easy to see how valuable they are to the body. But there are a lot of people who are gifted more like Millie, where their giftings don't put them in the spotlight and they're more behind the scenes gifts. And in fact, Millie is one of the most generous people that I've ever met. So she will give you anything of hers. And I got to see her use that this summer at the pool. She took her own money one day and she bought an airhead for all of her friends. She didn't get one, but all of her friends did. But the thing is not very many people get to see her put her gift into action. Yet her gift is just as valuable as Riley's gift is to the body. And if you are one of those people who is gifted more like Millie, where your gifts put you behind the scenes, you may be tempted to think that you're not valuable to the body. But that's just not true. You actually are indispensable to the body, and the body doesn't function correctly without you. And just like the physical body, visibility does not determine importance or value. And don't we see this in the way that Jesus worked and in the way that he chose the people who would advance the kingdom? So Jesus chose the weak and the poor and the traitor, the uneducated, the people who no one thought he should choose or would choose. Those were the people who he chose to advance his kingdom. And isn't this exactly what Paul is reminding the Corinthians way back when we started studying Corinthians in chapter 1? Paul reminded them that God chose what was low and despised in the world so that no one could boast except in the Lord. And isn't this the point of our spiritual gifts? They are not for us. They are for building up of the kingdom, for building up of the body, for building up his kingdom in a way that only the Spirit can do as it works through us in our giftings. And so Paul isn't downplaying those who have spotlight gifts. Instead, he's actually just building up those people who have gifts that put them behind the scenes. And he's saying that these are both equal because both of them, whether you have a spotlight gift or a gift that puts you behind the scene, they are both building up the body. And that is what our spiritual gifts have been given to us for. And Red Door has so many people who are so gifted in so many ways and who are using those gifts to build up the body. People like Jason Brown, who has used his construction knowledge to help out so much with Base Camp. People like Marie Fielden, who she has used her accounting knowledge to be such a gift to Red Door. Amy Shelley, who without her organizational leadership, the gathering would not happen. So she is such a gift in making sure that every single part comes together so that we can have the gathering. And Amy Dreyer, who uses her love of scripture and her gifts in administration and organization to help coordinate the teaching team at Red Door, and it is such a gift to Red Door. Tom Robertson, who used his leadership giftings to coordinate the demo that happened at Base Camp, and Colin Clark, who donated so much of his time and equipment into removing trash and scrap from Red Door. And people like Stephanie Kane, who runs all of Red Door's social media accounts, who is so gifted in design. In fact, you probably have something that she designed in your home that was passed out at Red Door, and it is such a gift to us. And Bridget Howell, who uses her educational background to help develop so many of the things that are used for kids, for Red Door kids. There are so many people who are using their giftings within Red Door and also within the community to do things like Wildlife, Young Life, Aruna, Young Lives, Hope's Closet, foster care. And I think it's so important that we recognize the gifts and the actions and the services of the individual parts of the body, because these parts of the body come together to form one body. And as Paul reminds us in verse 20, there are many parts, yet one body, the church. And that's where Paul started this analogy. And he reminded us that we are part of one body, the church. And that in that body, there are many members. And there are also many parts. And that those parts come together and form one body, the church. One body for the purpose of building up the kingdom. And so we have to realize that the parts and the body cannot be separated. We must realize that we are an individual who has been gifted in very intentional ways, but we miss out if that's all that we see, because we also have to see that we are part of a larger body, that we are part of the church. Because you see, a hand is significant, but it's nothing without the body. And we have been gifted not for the good of ourselves, but for the good of the body. And when we realize this, we go from asking those questions that Millie had to asking a different set of questions. And we go from asking, well, am I even gifted, to why am I gifted? And we stop asking where we belong, and we start asking, where does my gift belong? And instead of asking, do I have anything to offer? We start asking, who needs the gift that I have to offer? And instead of asking, why can't we be more like him or her? We start asking, how can I be more like Jesus? And when we do this, we start to see that our gift is a valuable part of the body. And we step into serving, and we step into action, and we start to see that the body needs us and that it can't function without us. And so what emerges is not a bunch of individual parts running around doing their own things, but a whole body that emerges, a body that comes together as a whole, a united body, a body where when one suffers, all suffers, where one rejoices, all rejoices. A body where the same Spirit who raised Christ from the dead works in us and manifests his power in us and through us. So Red Door, we are living in a time where the world around us is in absolute chaos. There is a holy disruption happening, and the world needs to see the Father. And the way that they will see the Father is through us, the body, as we step into using our gifts. So Red Door, may you remember that it is all of him gifting all of us for all the world.
wrap things up today, just a couple quick things. Just as a reminder, small groups do start up again here on September 13th, so your group leader will be reaching out to you about what that startup looks like for your group. If you're not in a group already, we encourage you to sign up for the Connect group by texting Red Door, all one word with 2 D's in the middle, to
84576.
All right, so groups are a big part of what we do here at Red Door. They're really important. That's where you see a lot of life change and growth really happen. So we encourage you, if you're not in a group, get plugged in. And there's going to be a number of options this year just due to COVID and what that's going to look like. So there'll be options for everybody's comfort level and needs.
Thanks for joining us today with our live stream. We're so glad you were able to come and participate and be part of our family. We miss you all, and we're excited to see you again soon, hopefully in person, maybe at the kickoff.
Remember that time in America when you could be in person?
Yeah, it was great.
It's coming again soon, sometime.
All right.
See you guys.
Bye, guys.